Working in a prison is really tough. It is not for everybody.
When you have gangs involved, you don't do what you're asked, then you would get beat up.
The biggest prison in the state of Idaho is also the toughest. The Idaho Correctional Center, the ICC, was so violent that employees and inmates had a name for the place: Gladiator School.
And that was because of the assaults. And that's why they called it Gladiator School, because of that reason. If you're going to ICC, it's going to be fight or die, basically.
This is what they mean. Caught on a security camera, inmate Hani Alabed is about to be beaten to within an inch of his life. The assailant even has time to take a breather before launching into his attack again. 8 minutes go by before guards intervene. This is the story of a dangerous business, of the billions of dollars that flow into the American prison industry and the companies that profit from it.
Billions of dollars a year are spent to lock people up.
No nation on the planet holds more of its people behind bars. 2.3 million prisoners, as many as China and Russia combined.
On our prison binge, we're addicted to incarceration in this country.
$74 billion a year spent on corrections. More than 750,000 employees. That's more than the auto industry. Small towns trying to get in on the boom.
You were trying to get the Guantanamo detainees here at one point, right?
Hey, man, we're desperate.
There are architects, healthcare, and technology companies, all after their piece of the billions behind bars. For nearly half a century, America has waged a war on crime.
A new all-out offensive.
The explosion of violent crime. 3 strikes and you are out.
But to lock up all those criminals, you need prisons. After decades of tough laws and stiff sentences, America's prisons are bursting at the seams.
As a nation, we lack imagination about how to respond to crime.
Martin Horn has made a career out of prisons. He ran the corrections departments in Pennsylvania and New York City, and today he's a college lecturer.
If you study criminal justice, you have to know...
He says America's prison boom has gotten out of hand.
If the only tool in your belt is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, if the only tool in our tool belt of crime responses is imprisonment, then every solution to crime looks like imprisonment.
California's prisons are so overcrowded, the state is under a court order to reduce its inmate population. California already outsources its inmates as far away as Mississippi. Hawaii houses 1,700 male inmates at this prison in Arizona, 3,000 miles away. But a problem for some is an opportunity for others.
Today we got 26 coming in as of an hour ago.
Private prison companies are picking up the slack.
You got his right arm?
The more inmates or detainees they house, the more money they make. Private companies hold about 130,000 people, or 8% of American inmates. That's nearly double the amount from 10 years ago.
Are private prisons the future now?
Certainly appears to be, Scott.
Richard Harbison is a top executive at LCS Corrections.
Private operators can design, build, and operate a prison cheaper than the government, be it state or the federal government. They operate more efficiently. Lack of bureaucracy, if you will.
Is it appropriate to put dollars and cents on all of this? Should the public be concerned with that?
If the public can get the same services for less money, those are less taxes that you and I pay. So, yeah, they should be concerned that they're getting what they're paying for, keeping an inmate secure, keeping the public secure.
Like much about this industry, the numbers are fraught with controversy, and estimates as to how much money privatization saves, if any, vary widely. LCS is one of the smaller private prison companies. Other prisons are owned and operated by huge corporations. Unlike their public counterparts, they're accountable not just to the taxpayers, but to shareholders. The two biggest prison companies, the GEO Group and the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA, bring in more than $3 billion a year between them.
I think that the private prison industry did not create the prison boom in this country. They responded to the market. States couldn't build space fast enough, so they turned to the private sector.
But private prisons have attracted legions of critics. Some from organized labor, since most private prisons, unlike their public counterparts, are non-union. Others oppose the very idea of private prisons.
What do we do? Stand up, fight back!
Perhaps no one more vocally than Alex Friedman.
Violence and sexual abuse and rapes and other human rights violations still occur at CCA facilities.
He is an editor of Prison Legal News, which has been covering corrections for more than 20 years.
Literally, you can put a dollar figure on each inmate that is held at a private prison. They are treated as commodities, and that's very dangerous and troubling when a company sees the people it incarcerates as nothing more than a money stream.
Friedman has testified at public hearings.
Society, through their taxpayer dollars, fund prisons.
He knows prisons inside and out. Friedman was convicted of attempted robbery and robbery and assault with attempt to commit murder. He spent more than half his 10 years behind bars in a CCA prison.
What was the difference between the for-profit prison and the traditional prison?
In the private prison, you would have fewer guards that are less experienced, who are paid less, who get fewer benefits. We constantly had new trainees coming through because their staff turnover rate was very high, which leads to more dangerous situations.
The incident in Idaho, which left inmate Hani Alabed permanently brain damaged, occurred in a private prison operated by CCA. Alabed sued CCA, alleging, among other things, inadequate staffing, a charge CCA denied. The case was eventually settled, but the terms weren't disclosed. Former corrections counselor Todd Gertson was not involved in the Alabed incident, but says he witnessed dozens like it during his 2 years at the Idaho Correctional Center.
I constantly asked all the time, do we have any extra staff? It was terrible. You could do the job, but you couldn't do it safely.
The American Civil Liberties Union sued CCA in 2010, claiming violence at the prison was epidemic. That same year, the Idaho Correctional Center had more assaults than the state's 8 other prisons combined. Gertson says he was fired from the ICC for missing too many days of work, the result of what he acknowledges was a drinking problem. He gave a deposition in the ACLU lawsuit.
You said in a sworn statement, it's clear to you that the ICC was more interested in making a profit than in reducing prisoner violence or in protecting the safety of the staff and prisoners. That's a pretty tough charge.
It was about the money. I mean, whatever they could do to keep those beds filled. I mean, because if the beds were empty, you're not making any money. And it costs so much money to hire a staff member.
CCA eventually settled the ACLU lawsuit. Without admitting wrongdoing, the company agreed to hire more staff, meet state training standards, and investigate every assault. Critics say the Idaho case illustrates widespread problems with private prisons. They point to national studies from 2001 that found private prisons had assault rates 65% higher than public ones, and systemic problems maintaining security. But conclusive current evidence is hard to come by.
Why should people care? It's prison. I mean, prison's supposed to be tough.
Yeah, prison's supposed to be tough, but also it's a place for them to be rehabilitated too, because they're going to be put back on the streets.
As the nation's largest private prison company, with 80,000 people behind bars in 66 facilities, CCA is the most frequent target of criticism. We repeatedly asked the company to address those critics and speak with us on camera, but CCA declined. Instead, in a letter, a spokesman denied CCA puts profits ahead of safety, saying, "Our top priority is security in our facilities and safety in our communities." CCA also said, "We meet and exceed industry standards on staffing."
There are plenty of horror stories that have come out of publicly operated prisons. There are good public prisons and there are awful public prisons. By the same token, there are good private prisons And there are awful private prisons that I wouldn't want to be associated with.
There are more than 5,000 jails and prisons in the United States, public and private. Martin Horn says that big number points to a much bigger issue.
At the end of the day, the answer is to have fewer people in prison.
It's a system that's out of whack, isn't it?
It's a country that is addicted to imprisonment.
Too many convicts, not enough cells. Later, we'll meet a man working to fix that, one offender at a time.
This ain't friggin' Burger King, right?
Yes, sir.
It ain't your way.
Yes,
We're gonna
sir.
do it my way, okay?
But first,
He's north, running towards Wetwood.
crossing the border.
Got him.
Punishment for some, profits for others.
Immigration detention is extremely profitable business.
Private prisons, public policy, when we return.
Hey, are you up north?
Out on this wide stretch of the U.S.-Mexican border, the days are long, the sun is mean, and the wind spits dust in your face.
In the Tucson sector, we're capturing in between 200 and 400 individuals a day.
It's where Border Patrol agents play a high-stakes game of hide and seek.
He's north, running towards Wetwood.
On this day, they get a tip on the radio and go in search of 3 migrants. More than ever before, getting caught trying to enter the United States illegally can mean getting arrested
15 by 3.
and becoming an entry on a prison company's balance sheet.
Got him.
Immigration detention centers are popping up throughout the border states.
From San Diego, Arizona, all the way to Dallas, Texas, that I-10 corridor and all of that southwestern corridor is the hottest area right now.
Steve Affman of Emerald Correctional Management says demand is so high that just 4 years after this detention center opened in San Luis, Arizona, they're laying the foundation for another wing.
We'll grow a minimum of 15 to 20% a year for the next 5 or 6 straight years.
Immigration detention is the new growth area in the prison business. The number of detained immigrants on any given day has swelled to more than 30,000, about half of them in private facilities. Many are deported after only a few days, but others can remain in custody for months or years. They include Brenda Ambrosio, who says she came to the U.S. in 2001 to escape her abusive husband in Guatemala. She knows she broke the law, but says she had no other place to turn.
You weren't coming into the United States legally. Did you ever have any concerns that what you were doing might be wrong?
I went to find out about asylum in Mexico, but I couldn't get anything. I would like to ask for forgiveness. I'm not here to bother anyone.
Ambrosio is one of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. While living in Maryland, she worked 2 jobs, remarried, and had a daughter born in America. But then a minor traffic violation brought Brenda out of the shadows.
And behind me was a police officer, so he put a light on me and pulled me over.
Eventually, Ambrosio was sent 2,300 miles away from her family to Arizona, inside the Eloy Detention Center. When we met her, she had been in the facility for more than a year.
I just tried to look at the future and say, I'm gonna get out from this sometime. I don't know when, but sometime.
Eloy is owned and operated by the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA. Immigrants have an important place in CCA's corporate history and helped the company get its first contract in 1984.
And we got our first day's pay for 87 undocumented aliens.
Detention facilities like Eloy bring in about 12% of CCA's revenue, or $200 million a year. Private prison companies are responding to the demand created by the nation's immigration laws.
CCA has got to go! Hey, hey!
But critics allege the companies are doing something more.